People off of balconies and shit.
Those were some wild days back then, man. Yeah, I was a different animal back then. I was a different man. Got you. Okay.
That's cool. Just hanging people off fucking balconies like.
It was an intense time period. That's where the all right.
Cool. Are we rolling right now? All right. What's up, guys? We're rolling, Gary?
Yeah.
All right. Welcome to episode 79 of Convos in the Pedicab. I'm here with Marlon Rice. He owns a vegan food truck on
11th and Lydia, brother.
11th and Lydia. What's the name of the food truck?
Community Vegan. Yeah, it's a huge Winnebago classic, 1973. We do vegan comfort food, all types of fun stuff from milkshakes to huge sandwiches, chili cheese fries, all the things you typically wouldn't think you could get at a vegan spot, you can get over there, man.
And it's pretty delicious if you ask me.
Yeah.
It's really good.
Well, thank you, sir. I appreciate that.
I'm going to be really upfront with you. You don't look like a prototypical vegan, Marlon.
Yeah. Typically people will look at me and say, "Oh, you're vegan, huh?" I mean, it kind of throws them off because I think most times you're thinking of a long-haired hippie type cat, who's all about peace and love, and I'm about peace and love too, but just look a little bit different, man. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's all good.
There are a lot of misconceptions. I'm not a vegan, right, by any stretch, but there are a lot of misconceptions that come with veganism.
Right.
And people think that like a lot of vegans, or when they stereotype vegans, they think of them as like really small, testosterone deficient.
Yeah.
Soy boys, for lack of a better word. Even though I don't really like throwing out like alt-right like terminology, but that's like what people see. That's what people see.
It's funny, but yes, you're right.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right.
But a lot of like really elite level athletes adopt vegan lifestyles.
Absolutely. I mean, some of the more successful ones, especially the ones who are playing later in life than typical, they've adopted a plant-based lifestyle. If not 100%, at least the majority of their diet, majority of their lifestyle is going to be plant-based primarily. The benefits are insane. Everything from you don't have to deal with inflammation, recovery is incredible. The way your body absorbs foods allows you to have higher energy levels. Your rest can be more peaceful.
Your metabolism is a lot better.
Metabolism is crazy because your body is accepting things that are easy to be broken down.
Yeah, and you also they also have a lot of fiber.
Absolutely, tons of fiber.
Yeah, hence easy to
broken
down.
And here in the States, we're a fiber deficient country, man.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, we're extremely fiber deficient, bro. I mean, the number of people, just keeping it real, who have minimal amounts of bowel movements weekly is insane. You know what I mean? And I know a lot of people don't want to talk about shitting necessarily, but keeping it real though, man, you should be shitting multiple times daily. Nothing should sit in your body longer than 24, 48 hours. Absolutely nothing except for the organs that you have. Even the blood that we have regenerates itself. If you got food that's sitting in your body multiple days at a time, guaranteed you got some nasty shit happening.
There's no argument in that at all. Like that, I fully agree with that.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's a lot of discipline that comes with being a vegan.
No doubt.
There's a lot of discipline. I had an MMA fight a few years ago, and I didn't go fully vegan, but the majority of my diet was like plant-based.
Right.
Like I ate a plant-based diet, but I still ate chicken. I still ate like fish, or I had like bison or ground beef that was like organic and like certified humane and all that stuff, because I do I do understand that there's a ton of discipline that goes into going vegan.
Right.
But you also have to be self-aware to be able to understand your protein intake going vegan, and that's a very difficult thing to do. And so it felt more manageable to me to just eat my organic chicken, have my protein shakes, do that while, getting all my vegetables from like JBG, or getting my vegetables even from Central Market that were like, or certified organic and like raised on farms and stuff like that. So like I always was like big on buying sustainably raised veggies.
Yeah. But you felt good from it though, didn't you? I mean, eating
I felt
more
amazing.
plant-based
Like I was
foods,
like a testosterone-filled fucking ape, dude. I was
right.
Yeah, right. I was. It was ridiculous.
Yeah, no doubt.
Energy-wise, I felt like really high energy when I was working out in the gym.
Mm-hmm.
But when I was like not in the gym, I was exhausted. But that could also
Okay.
be because of how hard you were going in the gym.
Yeah, no doubt.
So there could
Yeah,
also
yeah,
be
yeah.
like that little trade-off.
Right.
But it took a lot. Like, it was a full-time job to even be able to eat everything. Like, I was monitoring every calorie I was eating.
Right.
You know what I mean? I was like, I would dedicate entire days to meal prepping,
Yeah.
and even that sometimes wasn't enough.
Yeah, it
and
takes a.
it's like a full-time job almost, and I think that people who adopt this lifestyle need to understand that this is a full-time job.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely a full-time job. But what I tell people in terms of the price that you pay, you're either going to pay now or pay later. So at some point, you're going to have to pay in terms of how you treat your body, the amount of time that we spend on our food, on our prep. For me, it's actually grown to where even beyond prep, it's about the relationship I have with my food. You know what I mean? For me, you know, the prep and all that, it's one thing, but I want to have a good relationship with my food. I want to be able to touch my food. I want to be able to appreciate my food by putting my hands on it, going through that entire process. So for me, all of that, I think, is a part of the benefit I get from what it is I eat. You know, it's beyond just the nutrition side. I think it's about the relationship that we have with food also. So for me, I kind of changed the way I looked at that whole process. The same way I may look at a relationship with someone I care about, food is on that same level, man. I mean, because food is what keeps us going. You know what I mean? Food is what either keeps us going or it's going to have us in a shitty position. So with that being said,
I agree.
Yeah, I've tried to.
People eat their feelings all the time, or they eat because they're bored, or they eat for
There's
a whole.
a lot of, right.
People
absolutely.
eat for a whole multitude of reasons, and hunger is on the bottom.
Right.
Hunger is literally on the bottom of the reasons why people.
So
overeat.
so you're right. So there are a variety of relationships that we have with food. So with that being said, I just wanted to make sure I have the right one. You know what I mean? So that's why I said you got to take the time, put the focus in on that. That's why, you know, in addition to the way that I eat, you know, in my personal life, that's why I got into the food business, man. You know what I mean? Because part of it for me was being able to, you know, share my enjoyment of some healthier options with as many people as possible.
Yeah. No, I agree, and I think that one of the criticisms I have of, like, I mean, I'm not even gonna say the vegan community, but I'm gonna say, like, the promoting of veganism is the fact that a lot of people don't promote it within the lens of reality. You know, people just say, "Hey, go vegan. It feels great. You'll look great. You're saving animals," and they just say all these, and it almost becomes like a thing where people try to make it like cool and trendy.
Right. No
You know,
doubt.
and you got a lot of people even that I pedicab with or used to pedicab with that would call themselves vegans, but they're drinking, they're drinking Lone Star and smoking, clove cigarettes. You know what I mean? Or American spirits, and it's kind of defeats the purpose of why you're going vegan.
No doubt. And
then you're gonna feel like shit because you're not getting your essential amino acids. But like, I really think that like there's got to be a better communication, and there's got to be more pages out there to like help vegans consume the proper amount of protein.
Gotcha. Well, and that's one of the things where I think, and I'll tell you, it's funny that you say that because that was the first thing that came to mind as far as my concern went. Because whenever I first went vegan, I weighed about 340, something like that. I was a big dude. And I was like, okay, so I know I'm going to lose some weight by cutting out the meat. But, what about my protein consumption? So that's when I started doing research on that. And, man, when I tell you it's the funniest thing because the one thing I get asked a lot is, so how do you handle the lack of protein? And first off, what I ended up learning was it wasn't about the protein as much as it was the nutrient profile that I was getting from the foods that I was consuming. So as long as the nutrients were high and my carbohydrate intake was where it needed to be, I've never had an issue as far as protein goes. And it's funny because I've had people on the opposite end say, well, nah, there's no way you can be getting enough protein as a vegan. And I said, okay. I said, well, if that's the case, I said, show me the protein deficiency wing of the hospital because as many people that are vegan out there, there should be a wing at every hospital for people who are protein deficient. I said, but there's not. And here's the reason why. It's because it's not necessarily about the protein we're consuming as much as the nutrients
that are in
we're
the
consuming.
protein.
And here's the thing. I cut out the middleman. So I tell people, a lot of the protein that we say we need to get comes from the middleman. Who's the middleman? The animals that we consume. So let me tell you what I do. It's kind of like dating. This is what I tell people. It's kind of like dating.
I don't hear this.
Here's the thing. I'm like, there's two ways you can approach it. So let's say you're out at a club, you know what I mean, and you got you and your man, and so you see beautiful young lady over there on the other side. So you tell me what's the most efficient way or effective way to start some type of good communication, some good relationship with the young lady over there. So would it be to go through your man in the middle and say, yo, bro, do me a favor. Go over there and holler at Shorty and see if I can get that phone number, and let's see if we can work it from there. Or would it be for you to step up, make your way straight across there and say, hey, my name is such and such. I'd love to meet you, blah, blah, blah. It's always better to cut out the middle, man. You're more effective and you're more efficient by doing that. So that's the same way I handle my food. I don't need anybody in the middle to get me what I need, man. So I go straight to the plants. If animals were eating exactly what they were designed to do, it would be plants, even though we're feeding them all this other nonsense, corn and whatnot. So,
which is also fucked up too.
Absolutely.
That they shouldn't even be eating that stuff, which is why when I got my meat, I made sure it was they were getting the non-GMO food and they were actually eating a plant-based diet.
Right. So if they were eating exactly what they were designed to, it would be plants.
Right.
So what I've said is,
Just
another
cut out
reason
the
is cut out the middleman.
I don't know.
What I mean? That way I don't get, all the extra that comes with it. You know what I mean? Because there's a lot extra that comes with it.
I try to go fishing and eat the fish I catch for that reason. You know what I mean?
Gotcha.
And I went hunting once. I didn't get anything, but I want to start going hunting once the fall starts.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like if I kill a deer or something like that or a hog, I'm eating that because that is an animal that ate a plant-based diet that was roaming around, and, free range. And ultimately, I do think that you get the energy of you inherit the energy of whatever you consume.
Absolutely.
So if you get a badass wild hog and you kill it, you got that energy in your body now. Is how I look at it. But back to what you're saying, very few people are actually doing that, and most of them are just buying food from that they're buying food from H-E-B, or they're going to McDonald's, or they're going to Whataburger, or they're going to P. Terry's. And to be honest, there's probably more natural protein in broccoli than there is in a P. Terry's hamburger.
Of course there is. It's not even close, man. And here's the thing: I've actually been to a slaughterhouse outside of Los Angeles, and I tell people,
oh God, okay, I want to hear this.
I'm like, look, here's the thing: it's easy to. When I first went vegan, my whole thing was I was like, I'm plant-based. Don't even call me vegan. Let me
say
that.
Go plant, yeah.
Yeah, I was like, I'm plant-based. I was like, don't even call me vegan. That was when I first made the transition. But then made my way out to California, hooked up with some incredible people out there who were like, yo, we want to take you to the slaughterhouse so you can see what really goes on. So went out there to a pig slaughterhouse. Man, when I tell you that reshaped my thinking of the whole process, it had me rethinking the ways that I look at food. There was a lot, looking at these baby pigs that were 6 months old, 400 pounds, eating feces off of each other. Some of them were dead in these freaking trailers. And looking at that, and for me, just the fact that I played a part in the consumption of that at some point, I was like, yeah, I there's a level of guilt, even though I was ignorant to what was happening because they hide it from us. There was a level of guilt that I felt that I was like, yeah, I got to do better and be better. So with that, I went from calling myself plant-based to like, yo, I'm vegan, because in addition to changing my diet, I also, have care and concern about all living beings. You know what I mean? And so that's just one of those, approaches that I took just because I've become a more compassionate individual.
Yeah. I think Mike Tyson's a vegan too, and he brought stuff like that up as well.
Yeah,
I actually I saw a bunch of documentaries, and the first time I was exposed to that, I was in college, and someone sent me a pamphlet about how we overly consume farm animals, and if people just cut their meat consumption in half, you wouldn't see a lot of the packed slaughterhouses that you're seeing.
Absolutely.
So I actually tried to do that for a while. And then, I saw Food Inc. and a whole bunch other of these movies. And, I didn't go full vegan, but I stopped buying processed meat from the grocery store. Whenever I bought meat, I would either try to get it from an actual farm.
Okay.
That was local, or I would, or I would wait, or I would see the certified humane label on the chicken, and that's the only way I'm buying it is if it's certified humane. Or if it's like a bison, because you can't factory farm a bison, that's different,
Right.
So I've become a lot more selective. I haven't gone as far as you've gone, but I've become a lot more selective about the meat that I consume.
Yeah, and for me, it took time. You grow into it. What I tell people is just try to be cognizant and conscious of what you're consuming. But the funny part is, I've had a couple of buddies who say, yeah, I make sure that the meat that I get is organic and is this, and I'm like, well, here's the thing. I'm like, here's just one thing I want you to consider. This made one of my buddies stop in his tracks. He said, okay, yeah, I got to
I want to hear this.
Yeah, I said, I need you to consider this when you tell me about the meat that you're eating and how they're raised and whatnot. I said, there's no such thing as humane slaughter. I said, when you slice the neck, whether you say I love you before you do or not, it's still a slicing of the neck. And so I said, keep that in mind. I said if you're consuming it for any other reason, that's cool, that's on you. But just don't use that with me because, brother, I'm like, it's more to it than that.
Let's push back on this a little bit.
Okay.
In like rural parts of Texas, you have ranchers and farmers who grow vegetables, right? And some of those vegetables are for them and their family, but those other vegetables are for you and me and everybody else that buys them at the grocery store. And then you have a bunch of wild hogs who are an invasive species that go onto land and eat the and destroy the vegetation.
Right.
And so if you don't kill those wild hogs, who also happen to have a lot of nutritional value from them, well, you're also like starving people here in America because they're eating your vegetables that get doled out to the rest of the public.
Yeah, and here's,
so there's also that perspective too, right?
Yeah, there's obviously there's different perspectives with all of it. You know, I look at something like that where I'm like, you know, there's a means for
everything.
Yeah, for everything as far as, you know, how we can protect things and whatnot. And I know what you're talking about. I've heard about situations like this, especially out in West Texas. But even with that said, y'all might help build a stronger fence, man. You know what I'm saying? I mean,
yeah, but at the same time, there are animals who overly like there is like a nature cycle, right? And I mean, this is I forgot what it's called. I think it's like the life cycle or whatever it is, right? Like there is like a nature cycle, and that if certain animals overly reproduce, like you need certain predatory animals to control the reproductive rates of other animals, because if they reproduce too fast, they'll wind up killing each other because they'll fight over a finite number of resources. So there is like a weird balance in nature when it comes to that. I do think though that the 99% of people who eat meat are not processing or comprehending any of that, and they're just buying meat because it's tasty and they want to go to Pete Terry's or they want to go to Whataburger. So there is a lot of that too. You know?
Yeah. No, that's what we grew up on. I mean, you do what you know, you do what's familiar, and I mean that's how it was for me. I mean, I went vegan 4 years ago. I'm 48, so you know, I mean, I was living a certain way, man. I mean, forever. That's all I knew. I didn't know anything different. I was like, shit, that's what you do, you know. So, you know, like I said, for me, it was just, you know, getting older and got some information. I was like, okay, I'm gonna start having grandkids and, you know, shit like that. I was like, yo, and for me, you know, all my grandparents clocked out, you know, a little bit earlier than they should have. So at some point, someone's got to break the cycle.
Well, and diet too in like black communities is.
It's a killer.
It's a killer. It's not good. It's really it's a serious killer, problem that doesn't get addressed at all.
Yeah, it's a killer, from high blood pressure to heart disease to obesity to diabetes to, I mean, man, when I tell you in the black community, I mean, there are so many issues that are diet related, you know, which is why for me, you know, I said, I got to take that responsibility on myself and stop that cycle, at least as far as my family goes, and then hopefully it can rub off positively on, you know, other people. Hell, if it just affects one person positively, then I'm pleased. You know, even if it means not going vegan necessarily, but you know what? I'm gonna do a meatless Mondays just to try to clean it up a little bit, get more fiber in my system, whatever it may be. Man, I love that. So for me, it's not necessarily about getting someone to, you know, go 100% as much as it is. Just do what's healthier.
And people push that. People push these lifestyles in a way that turns people off to those lifestyles. Like I do know, like people really try to like jam it down people's throat and stuff like that. Specifically like PETA, you know what I mean? Or some of these like ultra animal rights like organizations, they like really try to like guilt you into doing it, or they try to like shame you into doing it. And I think that that's the wrong approach. I think that like you have to be, I think you got to be calm. You got to give people, you got to use like calm, love, and logic to get people to transition into doing that. And you got to reward every positive step that gets made. You got to just reward it.
No, I agree. I do think,
you know?
I do think. I mean, there are some aggressive organizations on the side of animals and on the vegan side, no doubt. I don't necessarily take that approach, but obviously I understand where they're coming from. But for me, I think it's much easier to get people to have a conversation with you if you're open to having some real constructive dialogue versus doing too much finger wagging. You know what I mean? Once you start doing finger wagging and pointing, at someone, telling them what they're doing wrong and how, they're hellbound for that, they're going to turn you off. So for me, it's just about having a conversation. And I like to use myself as an example. That way people know I'm not talking at you. I'm just telling you about my experience and how I change. And then from there, if that impacts you positively, then, hopefully, you'll jump on it. But other than that, what I tell people is I'm just trying to share with you the positive experience I had. And most people are very open to that because they're like, yo, I appreciate that approach. I'm like, yo, because I wouldn't tell you anything that's not good for you. Especially if I care about you, which is pretty much everyone. I'm like, I'm only going to tell you things that are good for you.
I think you want to leave the world a better place than where you found it.
Absolutely.
I think that's generally everybody's purpose.
Now, do they actually act on that?
Do you act on that? And so that's the other. So that's the other thing too. And I was bringing this up to you earlier, and it's that if I'm the CEO of a company, and I see some super yoked dude come in who happens to be a vegan, I'm probably going to be more likely to hire him over somebody else who may have had a better degree from a better university.
Yeah.
Because just looking like you're in great shape and being in great shape and being high energy while being vegan means that you are very in tune with yourself.
No doubt.
And you want people that are going to be, self-awareness brings value, and it transcends to other aspects of life, right? Like, it really does make you a better person, I think. Like, because if you have the self-awareness to, stick to a plant-based diet for years while being healthy and optimal, then you have the self-love most likely to not cheat on your wife or girlfriend.
Right.
And then if you have the self-love and the self-discipline to not, cheat on your wife or girlfriend, right? And you have the self-discipline to, stick to this diet while being in optimal health. You have the self-discipline to create new projects and continue trying to create new projects that will help improve the world and society as we know it, because that's ultimately, anybody who makes something in which they make an insane amount of money off of, usually they're creating something that's making life easier for people.
Right.
Like Henry Ford, he invented the assembly line.
Yep.
And that made it easier for people to go from point A to point B. Elon Musk has electric cars.
Right.
Even Jeff Bezos. I don't like who he is. I don't, like anybody that's profiting and trying to propagate lockdowns to make more money and destroy, small businesses as a result of what you're doing. But you still created a.
Speaking of Bezos, did you see that video of he and his wife and
with Leo? Yeah. You think Bezos really cares though?
Yeah. You better. You freaking better. Yo, you better care. If that happens, you better care. There's no amount. Here's the thing. At the end of the day, we are who we are.
That's true.
Like, we all go to the bathroom and we do it the way we're supposed to do it when we use the bathroom. Hey, man, at the end of the day, you stand in front of that mirror, bro. There's no hold up. There's no money. Yo, there's no money when you stand in front of that mirror early in the morning and you got that sleep in your eyes and shit and you know who you are. You start thinking about, damn, she was pressing up on Leo like she wanted to. Yo, that's a problem, man. He better think about that.
That is a problem. I'm glad I don't have that problem.
Yeah, man.
I'm glad I don't have that problem. That's all.
Problem,
but anyway, that's the point, though. You got to be thankful, too, right? Because a lot of people, they look at guys like Bezos and they hate him and they're jealous and they're envious. And, at the same time, why be envious and jealous of people like that when you could just be appreciative of the fact that you don't have their problems or that your wife isn't pressing up on Leonardo DiCaprio in front of you, right?
Just be who you are.
You have to be
enjoy
grateful.
Yeah, be very thankful. Man.
I think gratitude's a big thing. But anyway, back to what I was saying is that you created Amazon. You made it easier for people to get products at a really fast and high rate,
right.
And you made it easier for anybody who made something to put their product onto Amazon,
right.
And all that stuff, right? So you make something that. At least for a time, helped make the world a more convenient place to go to, right?
Mm-hmm.
And having and you can't do that without an insane amount of self-discipline.
Absolutely,
you can't. You cannot do that without an insane amount of self-discipline. And if you have the discipline to do all of that, and you have the self-love, and you need self-love to have that kind of discipline.
Right.
You're all still going to have that same love to help, resist the pressure to get vaccinated, to go do everyday things in society.
Yeah, there's a whole lot that comes with that. Yeah,
Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
that's
absolutely. I mean, it's because there's from vaccinations to education to there's a lot. There's a whole lot that we have to kind of look at and decide. Number one, what's best for us. Number two, what's right. You know what I mean? There's a lot out there. I mean, heck, just on the with the vaccinations, and for me, to each his own as far as what you're going to do, how you're going to do it. But here's what I get to when I talk vaccinations with people. Before we even get to that is I like to mention to people when we talk about healthcare is a personal thing that starts with the food that we put on our plate and the things that we put on our body mentally, physically, emotionally. So with that, if we're taking good care of ourselves, whether it's COVID, whether it's all types of other shit that we battle, a lot of these issues wouldn't take place if we took care of ourselves the way that we're supposed to ahead of time. We wouldn't have all these issues that we do, from dealing with wet markets to there's a ton of things that are issues. But for me, if we took better care of ourselves, our immune systems would be stronger and we wouldn't have a lot of these issues. That's kind of where I start off with.
I actually agree with you 100%. And I think that, that it brings you to what we were talking about earlier, and it's that, COVID hit Black and Hispanic populations a lot worse than it hit wealthier white populations. And a lot of it has to do with diet and the fact that there's a lot more fast food restaurants and liquor stores in those areas.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people in power who are complicit in this. Because
they do this shit on purpose, and then they put a BLM flag on their profile to make it seem like they're allies, and it's the most condescending shit that I've ever witnessed. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a lot of people. It's a lot of people in positions of power who, whenever they really could make solid differences, like generational differences in people and their families, didn't do so. What they did was what they thought was easiest, what would keep them in positions of power. So there's I've got a big problem with a lot of that. But at the same time, the problem I have also with people is I'm like, we have to take responsibility for our own well-being. That's everyone's got to do that on a personal level. We all have to take responsibility for it because no one's going to do it for us.
Yeah.
We can't trust a lot of people who we quote unquote vote in or who are in these positions of power. We can't trust them. So what we've got to do is we've got to take care of each other. We've got to take care of ourselves. We have to be more compassionate and more understanding as far as talking and working with each other, and then that'll put us in a better position. But right now, everything from the division to a lot of this, other bullshit that that's happening. Yeah, it's difficult right now. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that there's a big divide, and I'm gonna give you my attitude about this COVID stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to go down any crazy rabbit holes.
Yeah. Shoot.
Or any of that. But I do believe that this virus is being used as the pretext for a new world order. And I think that this new world order is going to be used as a way for people who already are considered the wealthy elites, who already have too much control of our movements over what we consume, over what they want us saying to each other, over our financial system. It's going to give them pretty much full control, where you don't even have the ability to get to their level no matter what you make or produce. It's basically going to be a way to stifle any kind of new growth, innovation, or anything that can make society a truly better place. And I think a lot of these people kind of are using and weaponizing identity politics to get people to consent to this.
No, I think, I definitely think I think there's some truth to what you're saying in terms of kind of where we're headed. People in positions of power, how they're potentially manipulating things. But at the same time, even as I may see that or have my opinion on it, it still goes back to, at least the way I look at it from my personal vantage point, is I'm like, okay, so what is it that I can do? So that's part of the reason why went into business doing the food truck and kind of getting out of the corporate matrix. Was
what were you doing before that? I didn't even ask.
Yeah, I worked in radio, man, for about 18 years, man. So I did advertising sales for a long period of time, which was cool, man. I mean, I worked in hip hop radio. I mean,
which stations?
K104 up in Dallas, man.
Oh, cool. All right.
Yeah. So I did that for a long time. Worked with a lot of entertainment clients. That was dope. So yeah, I enjoyed that. But also, for me, it got to the point to where, legacy matters to me, and then actually making a change. A part of it. When you start thinking about, within the black community, there aren't as many examples of legacy when it comes to business when you have black kids looking at things as you do white kids. White kids, I think about like from freaking Colonel Sanders to Wendy's to you freaking name it. I mean, black people, well, we got Aunt Jemima, Uncle Ben, some bullshit like that. Man, I was like, fuck that shit. You know what I mean? That shouldn't be the only examples we have of people who started something that's actually got some legacy so that your kids and other people say, yo, I can do that. So for me, I said, you know what? In addition to offering healthier options of food to people, I said, I want to create something that, my grandkids and great-grandkids can look at and be like, yo, my great-grandfather, he jumped out there and did this shit. You know what I mean? Yo, I can do the same thing and try to give some inspiration to younger people of color or disadvantaged opportunities to say, yo, I can get out here and do some shit and actually make an impact.
I think they should put Bitcoin mining software in all of the inner city schools to help level the playing field.
Absolutely, bro. Yo, that would be dope, man. Yeah. I mean, and we talked about cryptocurrency earlier. You and I are both in it, but that would be freaking awesome, man.
Because if there's awesome. A group, because here's my take from like these protests and what they really missed out on, right? And I think what they missed out on, and I've been saying this since they started, and they missed out on the whole financial system of inequality. Because like the biggest inequality, maybe I'm wrong, right? But my opinion, the biggest inequality that black people face right now is financial.
Of course.
By far.
Yeah.
And that shapes how the neighborhood you live in, it shapes your police interactions, it shapes how you're brought up, it shapes how you view money,
the food you eat, the way you all that shit, man. Everything. Absolutely.
And you're creating a system that's designed to keep black people in perpetual poverty so that they can be A, dependent on you for votes, and B, they're prison labor is free and cheap.
Yep.
And black people have better genetics than white people in a lot of ways. There's a lot of this stuff, right?
Yeah, man.
There's a lot of this stuff that's being used, right? And what these protests totally missed was the financial inequality.
Right.
And it's like, well, how do you fix this inequality in a intelligent manner? Because printing up a bunch of money and doing and just giving everybody a reparations check with no foundation for how to spend the money is going to do nothing but devalue the currency and create more racism.
Yep.
So
it's got to be bigger than that. It's got to go all the way down to these neighborhoods, the education, forcing the banks to actually work with people of color versus the bullshit that they've done in the past in terms of depending on who you were, you may or may not get access to certain money. So those are the types of things that have got to happen on a community level from one to the other.
Well, you got to put sound money in black communities, and that's why I think that if you put Bitcoin mining software in like inner city schools, and you invested programs to teach financial literacy. In those programs specifically, and those become the pilot programs for like a decade or two decades, you can restructure wealth completely. If you got everybody in the NBA, if you made it so that every NBA player had to spend 200 hours with a financial advisor that was not allowed to have any say in their finances after after that year was over or even during that year, with the amount of money that could be reinvested, you could change wealth completely. There's a lot of stuff that you could just do, and you could restructure this whole paradigm without spending insane amounts of money. That's my take.
Yeah, no, I agree. Just imagine if they just incorporated that into schools. See, that's what they don't do. When it comes to schools, you got all this bullshit testing, with everything from, math and all this shit that, granted, some of that is necessary, but why don't you teach people how to live, how to be entrepreneurs, how to be financially literate, how to be socially responsible.
Well,
why don't you incorporate true lifestyle skills that will really impact quality of life, that impacts financial situations?
I'll tell you why. It's because they want mindless consumers. They want a
Absolutely
society
they
of
do.
mindless consumers.
They want robots. They want robots who they can tell what to do.
Because a society of mindless consumers that that preach woke ideology to one another basically create a system of complacency where the elites don't have to feel threatened by anything they're doing.
Absolutely.
Because
that's why,
yeah, the elites. I mean, here's another fun myth, right? And it's that people think, oh, the elites feel threatened by having to like pay taxes and give their money away. No, they don't. They feel threatened by some new person coming in and taking something and making what they are doing outdated.
Yeah.
Like only 3. You know how many companies of the original Dow Jones are still like in the Dow Jones? I think maybe like 1, if that. Like they're all like they're maybe like 3 at the most. But it could very well be that none of those companies are still even in existence.
Yeah.
Do you know how many? Do you know like what percentage of millionaires make under $100K a year? Over a third of millionaires make less than $100,000 a year.
Interesting.
Teachers are in the top 5 professions of becoming millionaires when they retire. Out of every single profession in the United States, teachers are number 5 on the list. So with that being said, if you just teach financial literacy, you will change the game completely. And a lot of people, a lot of these activists, they don't want to do that because then they don't have a business anymore.
Yeah, I mean that goes across the board. I mean, in a lot of areas, man. They like you said, they want to keep people as dumb as possible and as uninformed as they possibly can. That way, like you said, you've always got to lean on them for something. You always think that they're necessary. When we just have to be more, self-reliant. That's what it boils down to, bro.
It really does. I think that the financial literacy stuff it changes the game completely. But speaking of what we were talking about, what do you think about the CRT stuff?
As far as
like the teaching critical race theory in the schools, like what's your opinion on that?
Man, I mean,
if you don't have one, it's okay too. I just want to know.
No. I mean, to me, I think history should be taught accurately.
I agree.
And I look at it as far as critical race theory or whatever you want to call it, man. Here's the thing: I think it should be taught accurately. I think we should tell the good and the bad.
I agree.
And that's where it starts and stops. So I do think that some of the bad shit that happened should be told. I think some of the good shit that happened should be told. You know what I mean? I think that there are a variety of things that should be expressed, but the way that I came up in school was bullshit. And the reason I learned as much as I did was having, a mother that was an educator. So we were reading books about Frederick Douglass and, the Tulsa riots and shit like that way back in the day. And then, my dad does, a ton of history research on our family shit. He actually was able to research and find the slave purchase order for my 5 great-grandfather. I mean, shit like that, so that's the kind of shit that people need to know about. I mean, that's the kind of shit you need to see. I mean, all this other bullshit that they're putting in front of us, I'm like, no, that shit that I ran across matters.
I agree. No, I agree. My problem with the CRT stuff is not that they're teaching that, it's who's teaching it.
Gotcha.
And it's like, I watch videos about like this stuff, right? Professors, and it's just these like white hipsters or these like sheltered academics who hate America, and these people are like gonna teach that to the next generation of kids, and all of a sudden like you get a generation of kids who like don't appreciate how good they have it in this country despite the problems that we have, because this country's pretty fucking awesome. Like, despite all the shit that happened back in the day, compared to other countries, compared to the amount of opportunities that you have to become a millionaire, that I have to become a millionaire, riding this pedicab around, this is a pretty awesome country. And I think people should, you could still understand the flaws that come, some of the bad stuff that we've done.
Right.
But you can also still appreciate, like, a lot of what this country was founded on, the principles should never go away. Like, our Constitution and all that stuff, that should never, like, free speech, the right to bear arms, the right to assemble, the right to have control over your own body, that should never go away. And my thing is that I really feel like a lot of the people that are teaching, that are like in our education system, they're brainwashing our kids to like hate those ideals, so that, like, look what happened with COVID, man. People were telling on each other for going to the park. Remember back in the day? It's like, that's who I feel you have teaching your kids about this stuff. And it's like, people do that in communist countries, bro. You don't do that. That's not supposed to happen in America. And I think that you want the next generation to really appreciate what the freedoms and liberties that come with being here.
Yeah, no, it's a fine line that has to get walked. Like you said, appreciating some of what we were founded on, I think is important. But also, I think knowing who those people were that founded our country too, and just being straight up about it, whether they were slave owners and all that too. I mean, you got to be honest about that also, and that's just a part of it, And I don't think it means that we dislike our country. I think we have to be honest, because on the flip side, I mean, there are just, and I make sure I tell this to other people, I'm like, there's just as many black people who did some bullshit, who should be talked about in history too, that I think should be included. So it's not just a black or a white thing. I'm like, there's some bullshit.
There's a lot of really bad stuff
that's happened across the board. We just need to be honest about it and accept it. And the thing is, there's nothing wrong with learning about where we came from, but we also need to know so that we don't go back to it. Because if we don't understand where we came from, it's likely to repeat itself, especially when it comes to the bullshit side.
The system was also devised to literally put black people against each other too.
Absolutely.
Even in slavery, you actually had black plantation owners. I read some articles and stuff like that, where you had because apparently if the owner liked the slave, they can leave their estate to anybody, right? So there have been slaves who inherited estates from the slave owner, and they wind up owning the plantation. So you had stories of people owning the plantation. You had the house slaves who would try to tell on the field slaves, and field slaves telling on each other so they can get preferential treatment by the master. You had all, and it was you weren't allowed to learn to read. There's been a structure of constant distrust that's been ingrained because of that, and that should be talked about and taught in school so people can break that cycle and trust each other.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I just think within the black community overall, we have to look at each other as allies versus competition. That's one thing that I do think we run into at times is, rather than looking at each other as, hey, that's an asset over there, looking at him like, oh, I don't want him to have as much as I do or whatever. So, but beyond that though, I do think it's a systemic thing that starts from how a lot of people in power, how they view things, and like you said, how they want to keep things separated.
Yeah, you heard about the Bretton Woods Agreement, right?
No.
So in 1971, and I wanted to talk about this earlier, but in 1971, Richard Nixon took us off the gold standard.
Okay.
Because our economy was in the shitter. There was Vietnam. There was a lot of turmoil going on with the hippie movement, and a lot of other countries basically stored their gold in U.S. vaults.
Okay.
And they wanted to get their gold. People were worried about the gold being recalled. Mm-hmm. And so and we didn't have the ability to do that, right?
Okay.
And so Nixon basically said, we're not in the gold standard anymore. And so now all our money has no hard value to it, and it's just basically paper money that's being printed on these worthless pieces of paper. Right. And then what do you think happens when that occurs? The currency gets devalued.
Yeah.
Right? Then the only people who can acquire wealth are going to be asset holders. Mm-hmm. And when one group of people are literally not allowed to own assets,
there you go.
Because of how the laws were back in the day and how certain private banks operated, well, who's going to suffer the most from the absence of hard money?
Yeah, you already know.
Exactly. Yeah. So that's why it's the most important way to fix this stuff is to just put Bitcoin mining software in the inner city, and you could fix this in a generation. You could fix this in a generation.
It could change things for sure. Yeah. I'm big, like we talked about. I'm big on cryptocurrency, where it's headed, the fact that it's decentralized too.
Yes.
Which is freaking awesome.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I appreciate, not having, certain people off in my pocket. You know what I mean?
That is true. People can still see the transactions.
If
somebody if you were on a list or you were a serious figure, right? The government could track all your crypto transactions. It's actually very easy to do it through the ledger, right?
No doubt.
But the proof of work that's required to mine the Bitcoin and send the Bitcoin and do the transactions requires so much energy that we don't have the physical ability to do that. So if everybody starts adopting Bitcoin, it becomes a lot harder. You have a lot more financial freedom when it comes to doing that stuff. And that's and have you heard of the CBD CBDCs and stuff?
Nuh-uh.
Central bank digital currencies?
Nuh-uh.
You got to look into that. But basically, a bunch of countries right now are adopting like digital dollars, versions of their own dollar.
That's what's up. Yeah, you know what I did hear about? I think it
That's
was
bad,
a
though.
South.
That's bad.
There was a South America country that I thought did that
Well,
too.
no, that's El Salvador, and they adopted Bitcoin. A central bank digital currency is basically fiat money but digitized so that the government can literally keep track and keep tabs on every single thing that you do at all times. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like you
yeah,
cross
yeah.
the street the wrong way, they could find you. They could just you say the wrong thing on Twitter. Oh,
They're
they
tapped
can find
into your
yeah,
pocket.
everything is just
got you.
super tapped in. Bitcoin helps solve that.
Got you. Yeah. I got you. Yeah, no, absolutely. No, we don't need that. There's
You
already
don't
too
want
much
that,
of that
especially
already.
if you want to actually be an activist to help your own community. Like Bitcoin should be embraced a lot more in Black communities than it is right now. It needs to be embraced a lot more.
But also you have to keep in mind you're trying to get a culture and a group of people to adopt something that they have absolutely no familiarity with. Also, just from a digital standpoint, a lot of people still don't have access to any digital shit, whether it's a laptop, whether it's the most they have is their phone. So not only are you telling them, you need to look into something a little bit deeper, but also something that they just don't have access to, not only from a physical standpoint, but mentally. It takes that type of time. Yeah, but the thing is, I think when you look at people like, Elon Musk and, people along those lines that are moving, into areas like Austin and other places where you do have communities that could use that help, that's what it's going to take. It's going to take people like that to come in and say, I want to reshape things. You know what I mean? And that's what it's going to take. Otherwise,
it doesn't happen.
And
you also can't finger wag.
No.
You also can't finger wag. And I think that a lot of people, especially like on the right, they'll complain about a lot of stuff that's going on. You know what I mean? But then it's like, okay, well, you're complaining and you're mad, and the stuff you're mad about is justifiable. But if you're not willing to talk to people that are like, if you're not willing to like actually like talk to Black people and Hispanic people about how this benefits them and present value, nothing's going to change.
No,
you know what I mean? And
Conversations
so, like, you have
are
to talk
important.
to people, and
right.
like if you're not willing to talk to people, sit down, be open, be honest, share what you say in a non-judgmental type of format, right? And make things relatable. Nothing that you say or do will ever come to fruition. It's like the whole Prop A thing in Austin. Were you paying attention to that?
Yeah.
With the Save Austin Now thing?
Yeah. I mean, it's the fact that we don't have conversations, whether it's in politics, whether it's food. I mean, there's a lot of things, man. But without the conversations, nothing gets accomplished.
Nothing gets accomplished. When people feel like they're being talked at, they don't listen, and that goes on both ends. It goes with the Virginia governor race.
Yeah.
It goes with what happened during Save Austin Now, with the Prop A stuff. Like people need to feel like there's a relatable reason for why they are gonna do a particular action.
Agreed. Yep. Agreed, brother.
Yeah. So anyway, I think we talked about pretty much everything we were going to talk about, right?
Yeah. We covered a
whole wide range of
in
issues.
The Pedicab.
Well, we'll talk in the Pedicab. We'll talk about Travis Scott, but that'll be the bonus feature.
Yeah.
All right. Anyway,
yeah.
Marlon, how do we get a hold of you?
You can reach me at plantbasedg.life on Instagram, or if you just want to come see me, Community Vegan is the food truck. It is East Austin off of 11th and Lydia. Come holler at me. Eat some good food.
Does Community Vegan have an IG?
Yes, it does. It is at Community Vegan on Instagram. Come check us out.
I'm excited. Anyway, Marlon, thank you very much. What's your last name?
My brother, Rison.
Marlon Rison, ladies and gentlemen, baby. Let's go.
Word up.
All right.
My man.